The car keys landed in her palm like a trophy she'd already won. My name is Robert Sterling. 47 years old. Real estate magnate. I'd just given my wife Catherine a brand new Mercedes, paid in full, keys wrapped in silk. The anniversary party was packed with our social circle, everyone watching this moment unfold like it was theater. Catherine held the keys up and smiled at the crowd. The gift is great, she said loudly, but it would be better if you left and made room for a real man. The hall erupted. People laughed like it was the cleverest thing they'd ever heard. Like publicly humiliating your husband in front of 300 guests was somehow charming. Like 22 years of marriage could be reduced to a joke delivered for applause. I smiled. Didn't break character. Didn't show the calculation happening behind my eyes. What Catherine didn't know was that I'd already made the transfer. Her primary credit cards had been deactivated exactly 2 minutes before she'd made that comment. The notification would hit her phone the moment the laughter died down. But that wasn't the real message. On the table behind me, I'd left an envelope. Her name written on it in my handwriting. Inside was a single piece of paper, a photograph of her with David Chen, our financial advisor, in a hotel room 3 weeks ago. I'd also left the divorce papers. Unsigned. Waiting for her signature. The laughter stopped when her phone buzzed. Her face went pale as she read the notification about the deactivated cards. Then she reached for the envelope, opened it slowly, and understood finally that the joke had been on her the entire time. Catherine's hands were trembling as she pulled the photograph from the envelope. The color drained from her face in stages, first shock, then recognition, then pure panic as 300 people watched her realize that her secret had been documented and displayed. She looked at me across the room. Our eyes met for exactly 2 seconds. In that moment, she understood that I'd known everything. That the car wasn't a gift. It was bait. That every decision I'd made tonight was calculated to maximize her humiliation in front of the exact people she'd been trying to impress. I need air, she whispered, standing up abruptly. Her phone buzzed again. Then again. And again. The notifications kept coming, her secondary cards being deactivated, her joint accounts being frozen, her access to our family's financial infrastructure systematically dismantled in real time. I'd set it up that way deliberately. Not all at once, but in waves. So she'd experienced the collapse incrementally, watching her safety net disappear piece by piece while sitting at a table surrounded by people who just heard her mock her husband publicly. David Chen, the financial advisor, the lover, had already excused himself from the party 20 minutes earlier. His wife was probably confronting him right now with the same documentation I'd provided to Catherine. I'd made sure of that. The divorce papers sat on the table, unsigned and waiting. But Catherine wasn't looking at them. She was looking at the guest list I'd placed beside them, names of every person in that hall, with annotations about which ones I'd already spoken to privately about the affair. She stood up slowly, like moving through water, and walked toward the bathroom. By the time she returned, she'd made her choice about what came next. Catherine didn't return to the party. Instead, she went directly to our car, not the new Mercedes, but the Range Rover parked in the garage. I watched from the window as she sat in the driver's seat for 17 minutes without starting the engine. She was calculating. Assessing her options. Understanding that every move she made from this point forward would be documented, analyzed, and potentially used against her in court. I'd anticipated this moment for 6 months. Ever since I'd hired the investigator and discovered David Chen's involvement. Ever since I'd realized Catherine had been planning something of her own, something that involved moving money quietly, establishing separate accounts, building a financial foundation for her exit. She'd been preparing to leave me. Not for love, but for leverage. David had promised her financial independence. A fresh start. A life where she controlled the narrative instead of living inside the one I'd constructed. They'd been building their case against me for months, documenting moments where I'd been absent, collecting evidence of my supposed emotional neglect. But they'd underestimated how thoroughly I'd been watching them. Catherine finally started the engine and drove home. I let her go without following. There was no need. I'd already installed monitoring software on her phone weeks ago, not out of paranoia, but out of preparation. She called David's personal line repeatedly. No answer. She called his office. He wasn't there. She texted him, each message more desperate than the last. By midnight, David's wife had filed for divorce and had frozen all his accounts. He was completely isolated, cut off from his money, his reputation, his ability to help Catherine. I destroyed them both without raising my voice. Catherine would understand that tomorrow morning. Catherine didn't sleep that night. I could track her location through her phone. She drove aimlessly for hours, stopping at a gas station, then a 24-hour diner, then circling back toward our house without actually entering it. By 4 a.m., she'd parked in the driveway and was sitting in the car, her phone dark, her options exhausted. I waited until she came inside. She found me in the study, sitting in the dark with a single lamp casting shadows across the room. She looked destroyed, makeup smeared, hair disheveled, her entire composure shattered into pieces. "Why?" she asked. Just that single word, weighted with everything she'd lost in the past 8 hours. "Because you decided to humiliate me in front of 300 people, I said quietly. "And because you thought you could construct an exit strategy without me noticing." "I was going to leave anyway," Catherine said. "With or without the documentation. You just accelerated the timeline." "I know," I replied. "That's why I moved faster than you anticipated. You had a plan. I had preparation. Preparation always beats plans." Catherine sat down heavily on the sofa. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to understand something," I said. "The car wasn't a gift. It was a message. The joke you made was our opportunity. The envelope was a declaration. Everything you experienced tonight was deliberate." "So what now?" she asked. "You destroy me completely? You take the children? You make sure I have nothing?" "No," I said. "Now you sign the divorce papers. You accept the settlement I've already prepared, which is fair, by the way. You maintain primary custody of the children because that's what's best for them, not what punishes you. And you understand that I could have done far worse." Catherine looked at me like she was seeing someone she didn't recognize. Because she was. The settlement was generous by any reasonable standard. Catherine received the house, monthly support calculated fairly, and complete custody access to the children. What she didn't receive was the financial empire I'd spent 20 years building. That was mine. Completely mine. She signed the papers 3 days later without negotiating a single clause. Her lawyer tried objecting, but Catherine overruled him. She understood that fighting me would only extend her suffering. David Chen's situation deteriorated rapidly. His wife's divorce attorney filed motions to freeze all his assets pending the settlement. His clients began withdrawing their accounts after learning about the affair. His professional reputation became radioactive within 72 hours. By the end of the month, he declared bankruptcy and moved to another state. Catherine received occasional text messages from him, desperate, pleading messages asking if she'd contact her lawyer about testifying on his behalf. She ignored every one. She'd learned something crucial: the man she'd chosen to run away with was fundamentally weak. When things became difficult, he'd abandoned her immediately. When consequences arrived, he'd vanished. I didn't gloat about any of this. Didn't mention it when Catherine picked up the children for their scheduled visits. We were civil, professional, cordial in that empty way divorced couples become. But Catherine understood the complete architecture of what I'd done. How I'd orchestrated not just her destruction, but David's as well. How I'd maintained my position, my wealth, my reputation while systematically dismantling everyone who'd tried to betray me. She'd made a joke about needing a real man. She'd gotten one, just not in the way she'd intended. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Catherine contacted me requesting a meeting. Not through lawyers. Directly. A personal call asking if we could talk somewhere neutral. I agreed, though I wasn't sure why. Curiosity, perhaps. Or simply the desire to see what she'd become in the aftermath of everything I'd orchestrated. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Catherine looked diminished, not physically, but in presence. The woman who'd stood in front of 300 people and mocked her husband seemed smaller now, hollowed out by consequences she hadn't anticipated. "I wanted to apologize," she said. "For the humiliation. For the affair. For thinking I could outmaneuver you." "I know you did," I replied. "That's why you called." "Do you feel vindicated?" she asked quietly. I considered the question honestly. "No. I feel tired." Catherine nodded like she understood something I was only beginning to articulate. "David called me last month. He wanted to reconcile, said he'd made a mistake leaving me. I told him no." "Why?" I asked. "Because I finally understood that I didn't actually want him," Catherine said. "I wanted escape. And I thought he represented that. But escape from your marriage isn't freedom, it's just a different prison." She was right. I'd won so completely that there was nothing left to win. The victory had become hollow, the revenge an empty gesture. I'd destroyed Catherine and David to prove that I couldn't be hurt by them, but in doing so, I'd become someone incapable of genuine connection. What happens now? Catherine asked. Now we both move forward, I said. Separately. Without the need to prove anything to each other. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly. Not reconciliation. Just acknowledgement that two people who'd once loved each other had learned the same painful lesson from opposite sides of betrayal. A year after that coffee shop meeting, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I transferred a significant portion of my assets into a trust fund for Catherine and the children. Not because I'd forgiven her. Forgiveness requires a vulnerability I'd spent years constructing defenses against. But because I'd finally understood that maintaining her permanent devastation served no purpose except to feed my own need for control. Catherine was shocked when her lawyer informed her. She called me directly, her voice trembling. Why would you do this? She asked. Because revenge without mercy isn't victory, I told her. It's just extended punishment masquerading as justice. And I'm tired of being the kind of man who needs to punish people to feel powerful. She was silent for a long moment. What changed? I realized that I'd won so completely that I'd lost the ability to genuinely connect with anyone, I said. The money, the victory, the destruction of David, none of it made me feel better. It just made me more isolated. Catherine began to cry. Not the desperate tears of someone losing everything, but the quiet tears of someone finally understanding that redemption is possible from both sides of betrayal. My children asked me why I'd made the transfer. I told them the truth. Because the strongest person isn't the one who destroys their enemies. It's the one who knows when to stop destroying and simply walk away. The blind fortune teller's words echoed in my mind. True power isn't about winning the game. It's about knowing when to stop playing entirely. I'd spent a year learning that lesson. Now I was finally ready to live it. 2 years after the anniversary party, I encountered Catherine at the children's school graduation ceremony. We sat in the same row, separated by our children, watching them receive their diplomas. Catherine caught my eye once and smiled, not the performance smile from years ago, but something genuine. Something that acknowledged shared history without requiring reconciliation. After the ceremony, she approached me in the parking lot. I wanted to thank you, she said. For the trust fund. For letting me rebuild without completely destroying me. For understanding that punishment has limits. I wanted to destroy you, I said honestly. I wanted you to suffer the way I suffered. But I realized that wanting something and becoming the person who actually does it are two different things. Catherine nodded. David contacted me again last month. He's remarried, started over in Seattle. He wanted me to know he was sorry for how things ended. Do you forgive him? I asked. No, Catherine said. But I've stopped needing him to suffer for what he did. That's different from forgiveness. It's just, moving forward. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing important, the children's plans for college, our separate lives, the surprising peace that comes from releasing the need to punish people who've hurt you. Walking away from that conversation, I understood finally what the blind fortune teller had actually been teaching me all along. The real power isn't in the revenge itself. It's in knowing when to stop. I'd won completely. I'd destroyed my enemies. I'd protected my empire. But the victory only meant something when I chose to release it and become someone capable of genuine connection again. That choice, the choice to stop, was harder than any strategic move I'd ever made. And it was the only victory that actually mattered.